Ariana Lindberg, and Angie said I'd be talking some about food today. So really it's in the context of community gardens, but what I've titled it is Local Sites for Climate Change, Engagement, and Response. So on a very basic level, community gardens indicate where people are. On a more nuanced level, they often also indicate where social, environmental, and economic change is desired and nurtured. As spaces that are organized and built at the human scale, community gardens also present very tangible sites in which members engage with and respond to climate change in ways that may not win the Nobel Prize or even make the local news, but in ways that are valuable nonetheless. As social spaces, community gardens function as gathering ground, spaces in which social networks are built, in which there is an exchange of information by way of intercultural and intergenerational interaction, and in which exposure to and discussion about food access and sovereignty, as well as environmental ethics and stewardship, can happen. Ecologically, garden spaces have the capacity to reduce heat island effect and manage storm water. And economically, such spaces can support access to local fresh food. This is quite the adventure. So on the screen here, you can see some photographs from, the one on the left is from 1918, and the one on the right is 1933, both taken in Cleveland. So here, the images from 1918 and 1933 in Cleveland, Ohio, of some very early urban gardening efforts. So some of the earliest accounts of urban and community gardening in the US recall the role of, quote, slacker land in producing truly remarkable quantities of food, as well as economic freedom and civic involvement. And I would suggest that if leftover bits of the urban fabric have the ability to support such an impact, we could expect an even greater return from permanently established garden sites when it comes to mitigating social, economic, and environmental challenges that are made increasingly evident in the midst of our climate crisis. And I'd go even further to suggest that maybe we ask the question why such productive sites are seldom at the forefront of urban and environmental planning. Such spaces so very often face vulnerability, particularly in the absence of, or kind of the tenuous nature of ownership and land tenure. Thank you. What strikes me quite powerfully when looking at community gardens as a sort of case study is that these are spaces that demonstrate both diversity, which I argue is a very necessary component of resilience, and an aesthetic of care. These are also spaces in which reciprocity flourishes between people, place, and the more than human. In terms of diversity, community gardens very often exhibit a wealth of crop varieties: bitter melon, sweet potato greens, popolo, prickly pear, epazote, and so much more, as well as approaches to cultivating and providing forage and habitat for pollinators and healthy soil critters. I think we all know that variation within a species creates stability and increases the likelihood that species can adapt to and survive environmental pressures. In terms of an aesthetic of care, I could leave it simply as a statement that it makes a difference when one notices that a particular landscape is taken care of. However, by an aesthetic of care, I mean that one is invested in the garden in an intimate exchange, and this can teach us worlds about developing and practicing a much larger climate ethic that is rooted in attentiveness. A primary lesson, and I'm borrowing a bit from landscape architect Randy Hester here from his book, Design for an Ecologic Democracy. But he suggests that a primary lesson of ecology is that everything is interconnected in one single web of life. To work together to solve difficult problems, we need to be aware of, experience, and understand the interrelationships between multiple aspects of the inhabited landscape. Every action in the urban landscape causes an opposite equivalent and many secondary reactions and side effects, which may be invisible, unknown, and harmful to us. Or these actions might lead to really powerful manners of approaching much larger challenges. He writes, connectedness encompasses the mutual dependence and appropriate relationships of part of an ecosystem, including human and non-human aspects, which need to be reflected in physical arrangements. Connectedness is a particular way of design thinking that maximizes mutual social and ecological benefits by expressing fundamental associations between the parts of an ecosystem, a city, or an individual site. Connectedness enables, disconnectedness disables. Thank you. I will leave it there and hopefully we'll have some more discussion. But let me introduce to you Sebastian Schlecht. Apologies if I mispronounced your name, Sebastian. And Sebastian is an architect with a focus on urban development, and he is in Essen, Germany. So I'll turn it over to you, Sebastian.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ariana, and thank you so much for having me on this Climate Bridge conference. I am Sebastian Schlecht from the city of Essen and also founder of an initiative. It's called the Landscape Laboratory of Ruhr Metropolis. And maybe you have to share your slides so I can start my slideshow. Great. So I will tell a little bit about people and places in the Ruhr region. So people and place should be connected. That's a great I think I shared the wrong view. 1 second. So, okay, here we go. Hope you can see this properly. Yeah, people and climate change. So Essen is in the Ruhr region. I think you may know it. It's a region which was a beautiful rural landscape 200 years ago. And this landscape is still there. So it may be the symbol for even the things happening today and maybe in the future. You see two rivers and a rural landscape in between, and in the middle here is the small village, which was Essen. And this is what it looks like today. So the whole area is populated with 5 million people, the Ruhr region, and Essen is in between. 600,000 people live in the city area of Essen. And the whole landscape was shaped and fragmented by this heavy industrialization process. And so this landscape is still there, but it is really disturbed by coal mining and diffraction of earth levels, and rivers stopped flowing. And so this whole landscape today is a maintained landscape. But additionally, we have climate change affects us. So we notice very hard that the vulnerability of these cities is very high. So small changes in temperature and weather can affect us. This is a storm from 2014, which destroyed more than 20,000 trees in the city area. We had drought 2018. We had one fire, not as huge as at other places, but it's also a symbol for things happening. We have heavy rainfall in small parts of the city, which just bring all the water systems to collapse. And also we still suffer from the outcomes of resource consumption and traffic with affecting health of people and also the quality of places of people. Only a small view on this is a heat map of the city. So you see people live in special areas are more affected from heat waves. And this is also a map which shows the social dimension of the region. So the industrialization was mainly in the north, and still today most people with small incomes live in the northern parts, and also most people with which are migrants or coming from foreign countries live in the north, and the south is pretty green. And so the people and the place are very much in a dependence. In Essen, we have a green story also to tell. So we have a green plan since 1920, and we try today to connect the green south and the more industrialized and dense populated north with the green plan. It's called New Ways to the Water, and this is pretty working since 14 years, but we are updating it now, and we are setting up a network of paths and roads along these old creeks, which are renatured in the last decades. And also we connect with using industrial railway lines for cycling and walking connections, but also we implement green corridors from north to south to connect these parts of the city, and also they serve as biodiversity and cooling areas and recreation areas for the people. This is a symbolic picture which shows one river in Essen. So this is the Borbecker Mühlbach. It is converted from the open sewer, which it was in the industrialization times, again back to a natural habitat. So these rivers are still there. On some places they do not flow on their own, so we have technical systems, but still we have to get rid of all the rainwater, and we can now use these rivers also for nature and connect people with nature in the neighborhoods. People lived before on that open sewers. They have been affected by a very bad smell in the summer. So this green network of paths is a program also running in Essen. We have today some kilometers. It's 376 kilometers altogether, but also we integrate long-term unemployed people in this program, in education, in landscaping, and we integrate them in the regular labor market again. So we see a strong interconnection between all these people, place, green, mobility, but also to biodiversity, climate and health. And also very important is the budget. We need budget for it, but we also need lots of money to pay for all the damages and all the losses we already have today. So this landscape design is a huge industrial area from a steel production side. This is more top-down planning, but also bringing lots of quality of life to neighborhoods and people, and also upgrading areas which are very close to the city center in Essen. But also on the small scale from the bottom-up processes, it's very important to implement a small project. This is a parklet, which is on the European Mobility Week project, and people have been able to use the usually parking space for a temporary period and have a meeting point, and enjoy life much more with this kind of built environment. So the connectiveness we already heard enables, and it's really important to connect with people on this transition from for the future city, and we have to integrate this climate adaptation and mitigation measures. And this is also a chance to upgrade neighborhoods and to rethink our streets and our open spaces. The city of Essen was the Green Capital of Europe 2017. The Green Capital is an award given to cities, but also it's a very formal application process which made us to assess 12 goals and 12 indicators of this application process we still use today. So we have 12 indicators which we report on, and they cover CO2 emissions and noise and water quality and green spaces and green jobs, refurbishment and rainwater decoupling. So we have these 12 indicators still in use, and we are sure that we need an integrated management. And now actually we teamed up for the new sustainability plan of Essen, and this is really an interesting topic because much more people can connect to this SDG themes as if you only talk about green indicators. So this was the team which was working on that sustainability plan, and the court decided on it just a few weeks ago. And we think this integrated view on urban greening and urban development is very important, so that we do not do, for example, climate adaptation measures and which cause a lot of CO2 emissions when they are built. And so upgrading neighborhoods is really a chance in these times, but we have to be sure that other indicators and other topics are not forgotten in that. So thank you very much for your attention. Here you see the Zollverein Park, which is a former coal mine and now a World Cultural Heritage of the UNESCO, but also a great spot for biodiversity and for people to cycle and to walk around. So this is what we built on in Essen, try to continue our path with all that mining and industry, use this as a chance to perform and to connect to people and also to the future. Thank you so much. Looking forward for the discussion, and I hand over to Michael Witt, and he will introduce us his themes related to water management.
Okay, hello everyone there. Now we can go on, and thank you so much for this kind invitation to Angie and also of course to Wolfram. And I really admit not being in person in New York, as you can imagine, and meeting you and many of the other nice colleagues. But as Wolfram already mentioned, talking about climate change while jetting across the Atlantic for a short presentation, I think no longer seems like a good idea today. So, but now turning to my contribution, I think my part here is to introduce or rather touch on a topic which might not necessarily is the focus of this conference. However, I'll try to provide you with some basic notes to the role of the health of the people in terms of climate change and climate mitigation measures. And so my contribution the next 10 to 12 or even 30 minutes is more a little food for thought than a comprehensive argumentation or overview why health is one of the topics we absolutely have to integrate into the upcoming big transformation processes. And in parallel, because this was a wish from Wolfram Höfer, I will try to give some insights into the situation of the population of the rural area. So long introduction, but now let's finally get started. And I will start with a short look back in former times and the devastating environmental situation in the rural region during the high time of coal mining and heavy industry. And you already saw that in Wolfram's slides. For instance, air pollution was so heavy that there was no more blue sky. And that, of course, affects people's health, especially vulnerable groups like children. And Germans living outside the rural region could not imagine how it's possible even to survive in this area. And interestingly, this picture of the rural region are still fixed in the mind of people in Germany, although the situation changed tremendously. Due to the political agenda of the German Social Democrat Willy Brandt, who proclaimed the blue sky for the rural region, and also because of the massive decline of coal mining and heavy industry in the rural region, this area turned incredibly blue and green again, and you could even say clean. And to be honest, Germans love clean rooms and areas. However, lots of efforts and progress were made, for instance, in terms of landscape design, and Sebastian already showed you wonderful slides how this changed, especially in Essen, but also in the other areas of the rural area of your rural region. But as you can imagine, unfortunately, the progress and the improvements are not evenly distributed evenly across the populations. So especially the economic decline has even considerably worsened the situation in certain areas of the rural region and certain populations, as you can see here. So this is not anymore that nice. And these pictures here, these pictures, seeing the deprived areas, this translates also in numbers. And here's a map of North Rhine-Westphalia. And let's see, there is a laser pointer. I try to use this one. And what you can see here is the North Rhine-Westphalia. And in here, in this area here, this is the area of the rural region. And this map should give you an impression of the distribution of social and health inequalities. Shortly, the darker the area, the higher the share of people with low income, high unemployment, and higher mortality caused by lung diseases, heart diseases, and liver diseases. And what you can see is that the rural area is still a hotspot for health problems compared to the rest of North Rhine-Westphalia and of course also of whole Germany. And on the next map, looking at the different exposure or factors that is concerned with health, in this map, you can see the situation according to the uneven distribution to the exposure of greenness and unemployment. And here on a smaller scale for the districts of 3 of the biggest cities here, Mülheim, Essen, and Bochum, and shortly explained, the greener the area, the higher the greenness index, and the higher or the bigger the circles, the higher the rate of unemployment in this region. And I think it's just by eyeballing clearly to see that those living in greener area, there's a lower chance or the lower proportion or share of people with unemployment. And then the other way around, you see here that there is less green and a higher proportion of people with unemployment who are unemployed. And so this also translates in a number which is just currently published by IS Global, which sits in Barcelona, and they did a nice work because they took numbers from 1,000 cities all over Europe, and then they took the main numbers for instance here, as you see, for green space and also for the vegetation index. And then they ranked the cities according to their position when comparing the cities. But what is most interesting here for our topic is that the percentage of population below a target green areas or as green areas and also vegetation index. And you see that almost 60% in both, taking both greenness indicators, that almost 60% do not meet the targets of the or the recommended targets of the WHO. So an uneven distribution in this case, what we have seen in the map right before. So in this map, the other way around, here you see the association between mortality rates because of lung diseases and the share of industrial and traffic areas. And I think it's easy to understand, the darker the area, the higher the share of industrial and traffic areas, and the bigger the circles, the higher the standardized mortality rate. It means here more people are dying because of lung diseases compared to the other parts of the region. And again, you see quite an association just by describing the situation. So this data or this map also can translate it again into pictures. And what you can see here is a traffic a highway, which in essence goes directly through the neighborhoods of the people. And of course, you can imagine that there is a high air pollution and noise pollution for those people living here, almost 50 meters beneath a German autobahn or highway. And maybe you know that there is sometimes no speed limit, so it's just that they're going through. And what you can also see, those using public transport, when waiting at the bus stop, they are sitting directly into in between these or in this highway. And of course, this is even not nice, but it's also very loud, and the air pollution, we won't have to talk about that. And also what you can see here in this picture is that, of course, people living in these kinds of situations, so nearby a very noisy traffic road, are not those people who are affluent, but those people who do not have enough money, do have less income, and often have the highest risk to get sick or to have these diseases. And when it comes now to the health of the people, and this is also something too when it comes to mitigation measures, you have to take in account keeping people healthy. You must think about that an individual can stay healthy by itself by just having a good lifestyle and being physically active and all this stuff, what you know, stop smoking and so on. But the more an individual has to tackle these health hazards like poverty, poor housing, unemployment, poor neighborhoods, as I have shown you in the pictures, lack of education and environmental health hazards, and the more he has to tackle these health hazards, this individual has massive difficulties to stay healthy or to choose for healthy choices, as we say. So when it comes to interventions or intervention strategies, or also if it comes to mitigation strategies, you always have to keep this association in mind, that you have especially look at those vulnerable groups that have to tackle all these health hazards. And taking together, based on the WHO, who stated that human is a basic human right, and it's essential for the social and economic development. And you could also say that a sustainable development must be a healthy development, because if you have a sustainable development, of course, you take care of clean air and so on and so on. And on the other hand, if you have a healthy population, this population is more able to take care of their environment and to take care and think of what to do that we have a sustainable environment and take care for climate change. But one of the priorities must be equity. So this is a basic priority in creating supportive and resilient environment. And hopefully this was a bit more clear with the last pictures I've shown you. And taking together, there's a recognition of need to promote health through urban planning and development, and also to develop capacity to influence urban planning, development, and design. And all this in respect to resilience, sustainability, and equity. So health and climate change mitigation procedure and urban planning have to work closely together because they are dependent from each other. And it's a challenge, but there is lots of help outside already. So many statements from governments, and also there are tools. Here's just one for healthy streets. Just have a short look over it. You can easily Google that. And it helps even for participation process where people have a look, how healthy is my street, and so on and so on. And on a more broader view is the Healthy Built Environment Checklist, which is already more than 10 years old, and we have a lot of experience with that one. It's very helpful for also helpful guide for considering health in development policies, plans, and proposals. And it's easy to use, and it's a helpful tool to do all these things I just said, to couple health aspects and development aspects to tackle this climate change efforts we have. And with that, I would like to stop or finish my contribution with picture here from Essen, and I will take over to Michael. And sorry, Michael, I'm not so good prepared that I have to introduce you in more detail. This was a surprise, so probably you might help me and introduce yourself. So thank you very much for listening to me. And now, Michael, your turn. And now I skip all of this.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody here. To our friends in Germany, guten Abend. Welcome. My name is Michael Witt. I'm General Counsel of the Passaic Valley Sewage Commission, which is in Newark, New Jersey. And I'd like to thank Rutgers and the German government for sponsoring this conference and for asking me to speak here. I'd also like to thank my three panelists, because I really think that the three of you set up what I'm going to say really well. We had Ariana talking about things, climate change, and what people can do affecting them on a very small personal level. We had Sebastian talking about the government policy aspect of this, and then Susanna was just talking about the public health aspect of it. And my presentation is really going to tie all these three things together in a real-life example that is currently going on. So first of all, I should say, you probably already have guessed this, I'm not an academic. I'm going to do a presentation here that I don't have the answer to this question, and I'm not going to give you the answer. And that's kind of the cool thing about this, is it's really designed to have a discussion about this between you, the panelists, me, whoever else wants to join into this, and talk about how climate change and how public health and how environmental justice are all coming together and meeting in one place at one time. So, does this advance? Not so much? Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay. So again, I work at the Passaic Valley Sewage Commission. PVSC is the 5th largest wastewater treatment plant in the United States. Every day we treat about 1/4 of the wastewater generated in the entire state of New Jersey. About 1.5 million people in 48 communities up in northeastern New Jersey. And this is where we are. You can see up there in Patterson, where the Passaic River starts up there and kind of winds its way down, and that's our main interceptor line. We treat the wastewater generated by about 1 in every 6 people in this state every day. So right now, that's what's going on. About dry weather day like today, about 250 million gallons of wastewater. Wet weather day, it's about 500 million gallons of wastewater. So it's a lot. So Hurricane Sandy rolls around in 2012, and much, for our friends in Germany, that was one of the most devastating hurricanes in United States history. $70 billion in damage to the United States and to parts of the Caribbean and Canada, 233 deaths, completely devastating storm. It sent a 9-foot storm surge of water over the Passaic Valley Sewage Commission and completely wiped us offline. We have 2 independent feeds of electricity from PSE&G. PVSC is the largest single-site user of electricity in the state of New Jersey. Knocked both of those feeds out, so much like most of the East Coast during that time, we went completely dark, and were completely dark for almost 72 hours. During that time, 900 million gallons of raw sewage were discharged into New York Harbor and New York Bay because we couldn't treat anything because the power was all gone. So after the storm was over, obviously we got together with FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, and said, we can't have that happen again, especially not for 1.5 million people in a highly urbanized area. And we also have a lot of suburban areas too, but can't have that happen again where there's no sewage treatment at all. So one thing you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to figure out how to build a power plant on your wastewater treatment plant for emergencies so that if this ever happens again, you can switch over to that emergency plant. The problem, as I said, is PVSC is the largest single-site user of electricity in the state of New Jersey, so it's a tremendous amount of power, 34 megawatts every day, which over here, we have a little map of Clifton. It's the amount of energy, same equivalent energy to run the entire city of Clifton. Every day is how much energy that we use. And we're not going forward again. There we go. Okay. These 2 slides will, side by side, will show you just how important this is. So the one over here, which is, I guess, on my right now, your left if you're looking at it, this is Hurricane Irene, and I can't remember which year, 2013, 2014, typical 100-year storm. And all of these little dots, that's where flooding occurred, in and around Jersey City, Hoboken, Bayonne, and this is Newark over on the left. And again, PVSC would be right there, right where the Passaic River and Newark Bay meet. What people don't realize about Hurricane Sandy, it was actually not a heavy rainfall event. It was a big storm surge event. So we had our computer modelers do this for Irene. This is Ida. So this is just a month ago. This is data from just a month ago. If PVSC had lost power, now it's very loud. If PVSC had lost power, these are all areas that would have been flooded. So you can see this is, a vast majority of Jersey City, vast majority of Bayonne, spread way up and down along Newark, and now you're even getting places up, as far as Garfield that would be flooding out. And this is basement level flooding, so people who live in basement apartments don't have an apartment anymore. This is just a graphic representation of the same 2 slides, again using computer modeling of what it would look like if PVSC lost power again, and the flooding that would happen. This is Newark. This is the ironbound section of Newark, and that's really what I want to focus on, that area today when we're going to be talking about policy, because that is an environmental justice community. So as you can see, from Irene, you've got a lot of flooding already. From Ida, everything that wasn't covered up in Irene is now covered up in Ida. So all those areas are all flooded out. Again, here's the ironbound community. This is where we're located. So it's a space of about 2 miles in between there, not very far away. Requirements for the site. We have to have it on site so we can keep it under control. Got to have available space to build it. Has to be able to power the entire plant, like I said, 34 megawatts. It's a huge amount of electricity for one site. And it's got to be weatherproof. It's got to work when the sun isn't out. It's got to work at night. It's got to work when it's snowing. It's got to work when it's sunny. It's got to work all the time. Got to be able to power 24 hours a day. So the original proposal, and this proposal was drafted in 2015, was to put in 3 natural gas turbines to power. Each one is capable of about 28 megawatts, but you don't run them full speed all the time, and you only run 2 at one time. One of them you keep in reserve. 3 natural gas-powered turbine generators. You have to have 2 little generators to start the 3 big generators. And then you have to have 2 even smaller generators for fire pumps in case there's a fire in there, the fire department comes, you have to be able to pump the water in through the hoses. Now, this standby power generating facility is not going to run full time. If there's no storm, it's going to be offline 344 days of the year. Offline, not running. So it's only going to be running, there's only 365 days a year. It's not even going to be running for an entire month. If there is a storm, it would run 324 days a year. We'd anticipate, 2 weeks of a storm if we had to. Again, Sandy came in, we were back up with PSE&G within 72 hours, so we wouldn't anticipate much longer than 2 weeks. Here's where we get to the public health part. So you've got natural gas turbines, and everybody sitting in this room is here because they're interested in the climate change, and you know what comes along with natural gas-powered things, emissions. That's the issue here. Air emissions versus sewage in your streets, and that's what I'm getting to. You have, this is the area of the Ironbound the area of Newark was the Ironbound community. And as you can see here, largely minority, very low income, a lot of non-native English speakers in this area, a lot of first-generation residents, a lot of generational immigrant families, where you have the anchor person come over, and then you've got 2, 3, 4 generations that follow eventually and come over here. And so this community, when you talk about environmental justice, this is it. This is it. The median household income in Newark, New Jersey is somewhere about $38,000 right now. In the United States, it's about $68,000 overall. So you're talking about people, half of whom make half of what the rest of the country makes. The other half of those people make less than that. And so when you're talking about environmental justice, this is it. This is where it comes in. Options we're talking about now. So as I said, the plan for the natural gas-fired turbines came in 2015, and I know we're only in 2021, right? Think about how far we've come in the discussion about climate change and about fossil fuels and the need to get away from fossil fuels just in that 6-year period. I can tell you in 2015, when this plant was being designed, a number of public meetings were held about the design of the plant and what should the design of the plant would be. And guess what? Hardly anybody showed up. Hardly anybody showed up, and that's why the plan went forward. One of the reasons the plan went forward with natural gas, because natural gas was deemed to be the most reliable option. Now in 2021, when we're getting ready to build the last part of this project, now climate change is on the front page. It's on the front page every day, and it should be on the front page every day. So now people have asked us, whoa, hold on, let's talk about, is there any other available, or are there any other available options now that you can do other than natural gas? The technology for battery power, solar power, wind power, hydrogen power have come a long, long way in the last 6 years. And thanks to people like the people here at Rutgers, and the work that they do on this. A tremendous amount of technological innovation has come about in just a very short period of time. So we're taking time to look at these things again, but natural gas is still a potential option, even renewable natural gas, which I won't get into that. Some of you may know what that is, but that's a whole different thing. So I'm going to tell you the question that I have, and then we're going to, as we said, open this up for a panel discussion. And the way that this was brought up to me and the environmental justice aspect of this. So I was holding a public meeting about this probably 2 months ago, and a gentleman wanted to speak. He started speaking, and he started making a statement about critical race theory, and saying, look, in every policy decision, there's an element of racism, and he's absolutely right. He finished his statement, and he said, the bottom line was, he said, if you go ahead and build this natural gas-powered facility in Newark, where there's already a huge sewer plant, there's already 4 electrical generating plants, there's an airport, there's a huge rendering plant in Newark, where you've already got all these things. In this EJ community, you're being racist. And I said back to him, look, the quote you just read is critical race theory. That was actually being developed while I was in law school. It was originally legal theory. And you're absolutely right. But let me ask this question back to you. If you propose a solution on this that is less than 100% reliable, you don't live in the Ironbound. You're white and you live in a suburb. If this floods out, it's not affecting your house. it's affecting their house. So when you propose something that's less than 100% reliable, you're saying it's okay to sacrifice these people because you don't like the air emissions. So which is it? Where do we go from here? And which group of these people, where do you go for the answers to these questions? You have, again, the people who are directly affected. Then you've got the people who are the most vocal. And a lot of times, like this guy, he's not going to be affected by this one way or the other, even if the air emissions would not reach the town he lived in. But he's vocal about it. And then you have the people who ultimately have to make the call, who are the policymakers. And so that's what I wanted to talk about with this panel. And like I said, there's a great setup from the three of you coming up to this. And I don't have the answer to this question. By the way, this is currently going on. We are still currently evaluating these things. So I'm hoping to learn as much from being here as I hope everybody else is hoping to get out of this too. Because I am one of those people. I'm not the ultimate policymaker, but I'm someone who advises those ultimate policymakers. And it's extraordinarily important that all of us have these kind of conversations. So with that, Angie, I'm all done.
Oh, excellent. So what I was hearing Ariana talk about was an aesthetic of care as a really core value through community gardens. And I heard Sebastian talking about the wonderful things we can do at the municipal level in green infrastructure and how that all the benefits that can come from that, the way we can rethink our cities. And I was hearing Suzanne talk about the benefits of public health and really bringing in this environmental justice issue. And then Michael comes in and messes it all up by giving us this very complicated case study where we're having to deal with this the real life situation of being very complex, where we're not just dealing with how do we improve good things, but how do we deal with trade-offs? And so my question to the panel is one of, when you have a situation of trade-offs, a lot of you are talking about values or goals, how do you go through the process of figuring out how to deal with those trade-offs? Who makes the decisions? Are there some goals that are sacrosanct? Are there some things, Suzanne had talked about health as a basic human right. That seems like it would be paramount and trump all other things. So how would you, to the panelists, how would you deal with these trade-offs as they come up in real life?
Well, is this on?
Hello.
Excellent.
Okay, I'm going to use this now. And then also I want to say, as people have questions, please feel free to come up.
So starting with a really big and complicated question.
Sorry.
You're not sorry.
I'm not.
But it's something that, we face questions like this very often in, the design field of landscape architecture, right? We always use the phrase, designing with community versus designing for community, right? But then what does that look like? What does it actually, how does that translate when, we're, for me, talking about developing community gardens as part of this very local kind of site in which to cultivate and nurture these, ethics that will allow for us to become more engaged in a larger kind of system. So from that local to the more global. So that's something that I still am, learning what that looks like. When it comes to trade-offs, again, we often see that with the loss of community gardens, right? I mentioned how oftentimes they're in a very vulnerable position, with very kind of fragile land tenure arrangements. And so if a city is, if there's a proposal for development that might increase the income for that city, it's likely that a space like a community garden is going to be sacrificed to help with economic progress. So I'll turn it over to
It looks like Sebastian has a comment.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I think these different approaches or different outcomes of what we do is very much to today in a new phase of rethinking, because we are very much used to take action if there's a problem. So, and to take action was about so many years to build something, to rebuild and to deconstruct and reconstruct something. And this all actions we are used to take, they are all causing so much CO2 emissions, and they cause new problems that we have to really take a step back and think of everything we do once more. And so even this mostly, not even, but mostly the small projects like temporary uses, community gardens, just reusing things, these are all the things with the most outcome to society, because they do not need much resource consumption. And so even what Susanne showed us with the clean air in the rural region is today with the blue sky, but we replaced the emissions of the industry by invisible emissions by cars and diesel cars and NOx and fine dust particles. So we had this dark sky because we had dust in the air, but today we have this fine dust and you cannot see. So you have a blue sky, but still we have a huge impact on health in all cities in Europe. And this is also causing so much costs in the health sector and also to society through mortality rate, through illness, through people who are living in these places which have also a very low quality of life there. So the way we try to solve problems in the last decades, it was not very successful. In some ways it was, but in other ways we now have new problems we have to solve. And the way we learned or we try to solve these problems has to be a new way. So I think this morning we had a discussion. It was the idea of smart shrinking, so that cities have not to become bigger and bigger and bigger, and houses have to become bigger. So we have to be more modest and use less resources and become more healthy and happier with that. So this is really changing even in the last 10 years, maybe this idea of how we can solve problems. So what, and this is also in the greening idea of rural region or Essen is changing now, because we have not the tools to rebuild our environment without causing climate change. And we have to really think about that.
Just one comment to that. I didn't grasp all the everything of the talk from Michael because it was a bit disturbing. But I think one of the main things is now we have so much knowledge about different the effects of cars, mobility, air pollution, and how we build, and how much CO2, and how much it's not sustainable. We have all this knowledge, lots of knowledge, but what you need to think is that all the disciplines that are handling climate change now have to work together. I think we still are too much separated in our own disciplines, in our own sectors, without having enough interconnections to all these other disciplines with their knowledge. So there is so much knowledge outside, and there are so many tools outside. So sometimes I think, hey, just take them and let's talk about. And what Sebastian said is that we have to rethink that. I think it's not even rethinking, it's easier like that, just sitting together in committees or whatever from all kinds of disciplines. And then saying, what is our problem in this area, in this local area, in this region, in whatever. And then discussing the tools that everyone from each discipline can give over or can just insert into this process. So for me, interdisciplinary is one of the main issues, and of course, transdisciplinary, of course, taking also the people with you. But this is not a topic when it comes to participation. Not that this is separate, don't misunderstand me, but even when disciplines are working together, it would be also a big step.
Michael, what would you need? Oh, I'm not going to use this. Can you still hear me here? Okay. What would you need to help you make your decision? What do you think is missing? I mean, besides divine intervention.
Is this on? No?
You want to use this one?
Thank you. I think the most important thing that is needed, it's funny, you never expect to find yourself in these positions. I mean, like here I am, I'm this kid from New Mexico, and here I am in New Jersey, so much
Welcome.
further along down the road and in the middle of this very kind of decision. And you just don't expect to find yourself necessarily in those places, but nevertheless, here we are. I think what is needed is, in my particular issue, you're trying to build something to stop an effect of climate change, but the thing you may be building is what's causing the climate change. And, it's a very complicated issue because any of those options have a problem. None of them are foolproof. And, even, hydrogen is the industrial gas of the future. Hydrogen produces emissions that are sometimes even worse than what a natural gas fired plant will do. So you have to solve all these issues. I think the most important thing we need is to realize wishful thinking is not a plan. We had somebody saying, well, you guys just aren't trying hard enough. Where there is a will, there's a way. No, that's not the way it works. There is actual science. And I know in this country, I will not put this at the feet of our German brothers and sisters, but certainly in this country recently, science is getting a bad rap. But guess what? Science is science. It still works. It is still the foundation of what we do. It's trying to find a solution that works, observable, repeatable phenomenon. It's not just hoping that things will get better. So I think that what would help make this decision is that there has to be understanding that, look, we're not in a place technologically yet where we can do all of the things we want to do and wipe out climate change.
Yep.
It's a progression. It has to be a progression, and we have to get there. In the meantime, we may have to do some things that we don't necessarily like, but let's get the ball rolling, because otherwise there's this gridlock where nobody wants to do anything now, and people get entrenched in that position. And that's the last thing you need to make that kind of decision.
So what about the people in the room? I mean, what do you all think? We could do this formally if you want to come up, or perhaps you want to just talk and I can say into the microphone, but please feel free to come up and comment, or I'm not supposed to talk this, to comment or to ask a question.
Okay, so as far as the water treatment facility in your last slide where you talked about who is affected, who speaks up, as an African-American woman who was born and raised in Newark, New Jersey, I now live in East Orange, New Jersey. I happen to be one of those outliers statistically because I'm a climate activist. A lot of African-American people may not be climate activists. They may say, oh, fight for this right, clean water, but to get into the science of it, because I come from a family of scientists, you have to have that in your mind growing up as your culture. But when you, and it's not an excuse, it's for real. When you have a system that has been set up for you to fail, that has been, that other people are successful and are privileged at your expense, it's difficult for you to be an adult trying to put food on the table. You talked about the median salaries in these particular communities, and people even who, I have a master's degree in public administration. I could be over at policy, but I wanted to be here talking about the people because I'm one of those people who is most affected, no matter, regardless of whether I have a master's degree. There are jobs that people don't want me to come into because, as this book I'm reading right now, Professional Troublemaker, I'm going to be to this or to that. I'm going to be queen superlative in some sort of way because people have not been accustomed to me and all that I am. So how do I get into that commission and do that work? Some of us have been deterred from getting into those jobs. And those who have not been deterred have not been given a voice civically to know that we have to speak up for our rights as US citizens, that our rights of citizenship for the pursuit of happiness and to have decent air quality has been deprived for so long. Everybody's like, oh, we got to do something, we got to do something. But then what are you doing about the cost of rent? What are you doing about real estate inflation? What are you doing about the disparities in school systems? What are you doing about the cronyism and nepotism that goes on in these systems? And then it's like, well, what are we doing? People are ignoring the pink elephant in the room, that we have to make sure that competence is in place at every level. And that people like me who, I get in trouble for speaking up, for speaking the truth, but I don't care. I'm gonna always do it because when the smoke clears, they're gonna say, I'm glad you said something. Yeah, I have to be the sacrificial lamb. Not everyone can handle that. So people like me who are most impacted are not always going to speak up because they don't want to go through that fight. They don't want to go through risking losing this and losing that and trying to struggle or do this or do that. I'm built for this. But not everybody is. Not everybody is prepared with that mindset of fighting and speaking and saying what needs to be done and what's right. And why were there no pumps that pump this water out? Why didn't anybody use polyacrylate to soak up all that water? I'm using my daughter's middle school science project. Polyacrylate would turn that water into gel. And if you sprinkle some regular sodium chloride on it, salt, it would turn it into like dust and the water would go away. Now I'm saying this from an engineering perspective. I hope that somebody uses it. And my name is Sharonda Allen, so please make sure you attribute me to that innovation, okay? But there are ways, there are solutions. But folks are saying, well, they're not speaking up, they're not protesting. Oh, well, we can keep doing it. People feel like they're not empowered to speak and stand up for themselves because they've been beaten down so much for so long. And somebody said on Facebook, oh, people, this victim thing. I'm not a victim, I'm a fighter. But not everybody knows how to fight in that way and navigate and dip and dodge. So with all this intelligence, innovation, even with our transportation systems, you know, where do we wake up and say, all right, this does not need to be a political issue. Everybody, let's do this right. We have the technology, we have the know-how. We're at a university right now. We could solve anything, anything. The difference is there are people who don't want people like me to have any opportunities or privileges. So you're sinking the entire ship because you don't want the people in the bow to come up on deck and dance at the party with you. And that, if we don't fix it, all of us are going down. That's why we have a climate emergency. So everybody needs to step up and make sure that everybody's okay.
Do any of the panelists want to respond?
I want to throw a question to one of our panelists.
Yeah,
Is this-
fantastic.
First of all, that was incredible. It ties in with, saying, first of all, that was incredible. And 100% right on with the core value of environmental justice and the core issue that EJ is trying to resolve. Ariana and I had a long phone call a couple of weeks ago preparing for this panel, and I gave you a homework assignment. I said, I've never gotten to give a professor, I'm married to a professor, I've never gotten to give a professor a homework assignment. But it ties in with something that you just said, which was we were talking about micro gardens and community gardens as an act of rebellion or revolution. And I said, but against what? We have an answer?
The answer is, it is a rebellion against the destruction of people of color. I happen to also be an urban farmer. In my history class, I had hydroponics and aquaponics because I was trying to teach my young people about producing your own food, because our food systems are disrupted in this country. New Jersey is the garden state, and we don't have enough agricultural education going on. And our produce comes from way across the country, and it's not, quote unquote, fully ripened. When we have an urban garden, I saw a Hawthorne Avenue farm, and if you guys have been there, you met Farmer Mark. My kids have gone there and helped to plant and do, weed out gardens and everything. When I say my kids, I mean my youth advisory council. But the difference is that you are rebelling against a system that has shut you out of nutrition, that has created and allowed food deserts, so that in your culture, you're not even eating healthy foods. And to allow, like right now, the Newark school system, the kids are given frozen food at the table to eat, food that is molded and old. How? Why is not everyone or every parent up in arms with pitchforks and stakes at the Board of Education, at the school door? Because they have become apathetic and complacent, as if, oh, well, because no one is going to do anything about it, because no one has. The Government Accounting Office, the Attorney General's office, all these things have been reported. If that had been done in Livingston or any other suburban school district, it would have ended within 2 hours. So when we allow neglect and we try to rebel against this systemic destruction and disrespect of people of color, we don't have to ask too far. The bottom line is, you can do anything you want to do to Black and brown people and children. You can disrespect them. You can give them crap. You can put them in cancer cluster zones. You can put them in Superfund sites and communities. You can put toxic waste dumps and water treatment plants where they are, but you would never let that go on near a suburban school. No one. And I always say, doesn't matter who the servicer is. Anybody can throw anything to some Black and brown kids, but they would never, I don't care if they're Black or white, they would never allow white children to be mistreated. And at the end of the day, the rebellion is about white supremacy and its effect on non-white people, period. And anybody can say, oh, why are you throwing that out there? Because it's real. Because how many people like me live next door to you? How many times have you seen people do something that is destructive at the expense of someone who looks like me? How often have your relatives said derogatory and off-color things about people who look like me, or being friends with someone who looks like me? So as we sit here and we ask questions, you have the answer. We sit in a spiral, in a circle. Oh, how could this be? How could this be? You have the answer, but we have to all be realistic about the rebellion of being human and bringing humanity to our own communities. That's the rebellion. And also because big agriculture, big pharma doesn't want us, people like me, to use herbal medicine or eat healthy, because then they have to be stuck on pharmaceutical drugs that we don't need. Instead, we could just air fry some okra to control our glucose levels, because we could easily get better health care, which everyone should have for free, because if you make $24,000 and they still don't give you free health care, how are you supposed to be healthy? And you're working yourself like a workforce or like a dog. That is the rebellion. It may seem simple. Oh, it's rebellious to have a farm, because then you might eat healthy, and then you might not need all those big pharmaceuticals, and then you might live longer. Then your life expectancy may be greater. Then your infant mortality rate may be better. Maybe your fecundity would be better. And maybe not just producing more children, but making sure that they're properly educated in a decent school that doesn't have lead water and homes and pipes that have lead in them because of governmental neglect, instead of corroding pipes and having landlords with friggin' lead paint on the walls. How and why? The fact that people allow slumlords to continue that way. That's the rebellion. We can't look at one part of the rebellion without understanding the destruction in every part and every aspect of existence. Excuse me if I sound preachy, but I find it to be quite obvious. Maybe because some people can sit and talk about it and walk away from it. I constantly walk in it and see it. And I've educated myself so much to a point where I'm looking around like, how can people not understand? It's not that difficult. With all the intelligence and all this brain power, put yourself in someone else's position, someone else's seat. Just like Dr. Jane Elliott said, if you wouldn't want to trade places with a Black person, you need to be doing more. I'm going to stop there.
So really quickly from the chat, we have a comment that says that solutions are unintended, have unintended consequences, and that's why it's a all hands on deck project. And another person is thanking the speaker for bringing up systemic issues. Just wanted to throw so that people in the chat are being heard. Final comments from the panelists. We have, I think, just about 5 minutes left. Did you want to respond to Michael's question? I'm not sure. We're having some technical issues during this session. This is the session of technical issues.
Yes, it is. So when I referred to, community gardens as really these spaces of resistance or rebellion, I think I used the word resistance and had that question posed. It is very much in this response or reaction to a system that is not only set up and built upon inequity, but it's one that's continually fueled and fed by that it's, the thing that is sustained is the inequity. And so I think that these spaces also really allow for this, just, I don't want to say like ownership or autonomy, but actually a way of having one's voice and story and experience shared. And I think that's that, that bit of the exchange of, thanks, Jolene, the experience of, exchanging that, whether it's information or, learning about a new crop or how to cook, a green that you've never known the name of, that there is this resilience that is built up that can actually be productive and lead to bigger things.
I also want to give the folks, our German panelists, a chance to speak.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for saying that, for what you said. And I want to relate to the sentence, how can people not understand? And this is really the question in so many levels. And I think this, if we want to have an inclusive city that is really accessible for everybody, this all relates to public space and to the urban fabric, which has to be like a just and resilient and healthy environment. And if you think in that landscape level, so that the city is can be maybe a more ecosystem, a more productive ecosystem, so that people even can benefit in every place where they live, from gardening, but also from trees which can give them shade, from greens which can keep stormwater. And so we have so many options in that soft engineering or in designing with nature and using nature, which, because nature is still there, even if it is a city which is built and sealed. So nature is the ecosystem, and the nature is the thing that makes a city livable. And every place where we are in the city. It makes the air we breathe, the oxygen in this air, and it can be a great tool in cities. And even the small places like community gardens. What I said in my slides is that we do not have to think in this huge top-down approaches. We have to think in the small solutions which do not need much resources and which are available for all people and people in all parts of the city, because people which are able to have their own garden and a car and go to holiday, they can escape from pollution, from noise, and even if there's a flooding, they can much more easy take action for themselves. But if we can design the resilient city with in all neighborhoods, I think that is the way to go for the next decades, because our whole society is suffering from people which are not in a healthy and environment which enables them for their education and for their power. So we have built up a system which pays a lot of money for all these losses by air pollution and by also now we have these climate effects of heat or heavy rainfall. And in the end, it will be much better if we can empower this environmental justice on the city level. So maybe enough for that. So I think all these things like community gardens and the wastewater was also a great issue in our region. So this all comes together in that. How does the city work out for everybody and can be like a collaborative space for people come together and use this city space for their production and for their for a better life.
We're right at time. So I just want to thank all of our panelists here and in Germany. Can we just give them all a hand?